This fits right into our workshop here, because as you know, all week we have been talking about adjusting to change. And today we want to start the last 3 topics as part 1. That's called Mastering Your Energetic Conditions, also your energetic environment and your energetic interactions. So it's quite practical in that way, even though it's called energetic. Okay, energetic is a word that we often use to signify or to indicate that we are actually looking at things in a more holistic perspective, from a more holistic perspective, from the perspective of the physical, the emotional, the mental, intellectual, the social, the spiritual, and perhaps also for those of you who are trained from the pure energetic point of view. This is something that comes with training. We have been going through a whole series of workshops this month, going through mastering our relationships, mastering our goals, mastering our attitude, mastering the body. Then we had a few intercourses with X-courses with understanding the nature of darkness, which is quite important in this context, so that we know what we're up against, and that we covered inner darkness, outer darkness, and the nature of the outer darkness that is working through us in form of our inner darkness. And then we also looked at the alien discussion right now and how that is relevant for all these discussions that we are having here. Because after all, we are all humans that recognize that we are on a spiritual journey. And when it comes to the alien discussion, there is a lot of talk in these days about not gods not really existing, but aliens having come to this planet thousands of years ago and injecting their DNA into the human genome, etc., and therefore creating some kind of bind or some changing human evolution. So this is important in context with understanding where we're all going and where we're from. So there's one workshop recording that I can strongly recommend where I talk about the origin of humans and discuss this with you, because in order for you to fully understand your own nature, where you're from, what are you, and where are you going, these things need to be clarified. By the way, if you receive the instructions, then you will find all the recordings for these workshops, these mastering workshops, here on the right side. And they're also in the Sacred Self-Healing Forum. So this is a good 40 hours of workshops that you can find there to get the whole picture. This is really deep investigation of all these spiritual topics, guys. So we go in and use our consciousness to better understand it. We're not going into conspiracy theories or follow any particular school or anything like this. We are executing the higher thinking, the higher feeling, and the higher willing of our consciousness soul, which is something that we can all feel, basically sending this impulse to us here in this time. This hasn't always been the case, by the way, so that's something that we are going to discuss. So these 3 workshops that we're doing here, these last 3, mastering your energetic conditions and environment, and also your energetic interactions, they will help us to build a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. This workshop will zoom into the practical aspects of spiritual learning and how to better apply our knowledge to our everyday conditions, issues, and circumstances. This can include relationships, career, job questions, interaction with children, family, animals, social life, or money problems. So I've asked you guys to have questions ready because a lot of this depends on the interaction that we have here, this group energy that we're forming when we're coming together to apply our higher striving for higher thinking and perceiving. Particularly in this workshop part 1, I want to clarify some things by putting all of these topics that we've discussed all year together. We're going to start out with understanding the human condition and reviewing, some aspects of what we talked about with the mastering our body, the goal of human evolution. We are going to investigate the inner and outer expressions of the goal of human evolution. And then we're briefly going to look into evolution and devolution, if something is possible. Something like devolution, like if we're not ascending, if we're not evolving, what happens? And this is where the alien discussion was needed to create the full picture, which will then lead us to the practical aspects of ascension. What happens when we actually grow in consciousness, when we train our consciousness, when we begin to master all these things that we have been discussing here all year. And then what is it actually in us that drives us to evolve? How does this express in us? Or through which traits? There is a YouTube video of the study group from Monday where that I called Human Striving. It's very recommendable for you to watch this because I talk about some aspects of these impulses in us, or some of these impulses in us that actually make us want to become spiritual, that make us want to grow. And then lastly, we're going to discuss what holistic thinking, feeling, and choosing allows us to do. What can we do with this? How does it serve us? All right, so you can see here, mastering your energetic conditions, environment, and interactions is a very complex topic. It's the biggest topic for each and every one of us. It is the result of mastering all these other things, the result of it. We're not mastering our feelings, our thinking, and our body and our choosing through spirituality. No, it's the other way around. This is very, very important. Mastering our thinking, which is the first big pillar, is the absolute prerequisite for any kind of spiritual thinking. Because if you just thinking based on, what you've been conditioned with, what you have been programmed with, what you have been spoon-fed, none of your thoughts are yours, or the minority. And if your thoughts aren't yours, okay, then most of your emotions, your desires, and your drives aren't yours either. Not to mention your choices, whom you want to have a relationship with, what kind of job you should do, what kind of business decisions you should make. Okay, so you see these pillars, they all build upon another. And why is thinking there first? Because we live in a time where our thinking is the primary way for us to identify with ourselves. So we are identifying ourselves through our thoughts, and we have been conditioned, to make decisions based on our thoughts. The problem with that is, as you guys know, and also science knows that the majority of our decisions, roughly 70%, is purely emotional, even though we think we thought this through. Why is this? Because our thinking is flawed. And that has to do with the conditioning and also aspects of, deception, self-deception, and mind control. And by the way, please feel free to ask questions at any time. And just make sure that your microphones are muted. Okay, so I want to start out with this picture and discuss this with you. You guys are all familiar with the symbology in this picture. Would you like to share how you feel about this sign? What do you recognize? What do you know about this symbol? Who wants to share?
Hi, Jona.
Right.
I would say like that, of course, it's a yin and yang symbol. So it shows on one side and the other side. So that's duality, black and white, yin and yang, light and dark. So it's the balance. It's the two differentiation, two halves, good, bad, black, white. That's duality. But in the center of the dark, which is yin, half of the circle, there is white, which is light. So always a little bit of yang in the yin, and on the other side is the yang, and there is a dark circle inside the white, and that is a little bit of dark in the yang, but they need both. So there's a balance. So there's always, it never exists on its own. There is always a little bit inside the other. And in the center is the middle path, that is the middle path. And the circle represents eternity, like life. And there's always light coming through both to harmonize both sides.
Mm-hmm. We spent quite a bit of time here in the past to work with the word duality and what this even means. And especially when we investigated the nature of darkness, we looked into, duality and how this is a part of our human condition right now. Yeah, to always categorize everything into good or bad, or black and white, or masculine and feminine, or evil or light, or dark or light, or sympathy or antipathy. Yeah, and that is part of this condition that we have, the organ or the part in us that is mostly affected by this duality. Do you guys know which one that is? The part of your, well, personality, I guess. That's the ego. Okay, so the ego is the part in you. It signifies a certain level of consciousness that sees everything as black and white. Yeah, light or dark, good or bad. And this is part of this condition that we all have to contend with. Okay, so we have a part in us, and this is where the mastering the thinking comes in, that has a tendency to reduce everything to these two, well, conditions. Something is either good or bad. And you said a very important word here, harmonizing. Yeah, so those of us who have been here on the spiritual journey for a while already know that, the answer, yeah, the resolution is always in the balancing things out, in the harmonizing of these extremes. There's many, many concepts in our life that have to do with, finding the middle ground, finding the third option, not being judgmental. The judgmentalism, our ego's tendency to look at everything in this binary way. If it's not good, then it must be bad. Is part of our problem, and it expresses in automatic judgments. Okay, so we all know this already. I'm not going to explain again how our ego, how this expression, comes to us. We know that this is the problem. Now, you said something else, Julian, and that is that there's a little bit of light in the dark and a little bit of dark in the light. And I want you guys to really feel into this today. To fully understand our condition, it's really essential that we get this, that without the seed of darkness, without the seed of light, in whichever condition we are, there would not be any growth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One does not exist without the other. It does not exist without the other, and it's yin and yang. It's never been yin or yang.
So there always is a little part that needs to be challenged. When we talked about the mastering the body, I said something about 80-20. Never shoot for 100%. That's too extreme. Nature doesn't favor that. Nature favors a little bit of contamination. Why? Because it is the driving force behind evolution. Now put yourself into a place where everything is hunky-dory and you don't have to deal with any challenges whatsoever, which is probably hard to imagine, but let's just assume you live live a life, where you have zero challenge. What would your motivation be to change anything? Would it be high or would it be low? It would be really low because you have nothing that you would want to change. This is based on a very low condition. And this will surprise you, but the reason why I call this low condition is because it is programmed into us. It reaches all the way back to the protoplasm of our cells. And that is that if something is, not threatening, then it's good. Okay, so our protoplasm, like literally the smallest components of our cells, okay, are geared toward reacting, or are geared to react toward threats, toward contamination, toward dark. And out of that then comes the need to adjust, the need to do something. In other words, if there wasn't any darkness in this world, and this is often in esoterica often compared to Garden Eden. In Garden Eden, there was nothing that needed to be done. There was nothing that needed to be changed. There was nothing to even think about. To a degree, it symbolizes the stage in human evolution where, there was basically no impulse to respond to anything. And it wasn't until this sort of metaphoric biting into the apple, or the temptation to actually eat from the tree of knowledge. Mind you, the tree of knowledge. Okay, the desire to understand something, the desire to know something, the curiosity to investigate the environment. It wasn't until then Yeah, that something big happened in human evolution. And obviously, if you are Christian or Hebrew, or if you come from Islam with your spiritual understanding, then you see this as a bad thing. Okay, you see this temptation as, basically a fall from grace. Now, this is a pre-programmed opinion about what this sort of leaving Garden of Eden actually is. If you look at it from the perspective of consciousness development and human evolution, you can clearly see that this was a really important step in human evolution, because what we see here is the impulse for freedom, the impulse to have your own thoughts about something, to think and understand something for yourself. Very, very important to note, that most of these stories that we hear are interpreted, through organized religion. We already know this. But when you actually do or think it yourself, you recognize that this is actually an impulse that served humanity. Now, was it a dark or a light impulse? What do you guys think? So we can say in hindsight, it was good and it was needed. Yeah, because it drove us to our own spiritual and intellectual freedom. We wanted to figure out things ourselves. But at the same time, we lost something. What did we lose? What did we have to sacrifice in order to be able to have our own insights?
Remembering that we come from divinity.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, that I don't even think, after having studied those texts, I think that it's more like a complacency. I don't think that there was any remembrance. There was a sort of a direct line, like an umbilical cord. You experienced yourself as spiritual, and there was no questioning of that. But there was also no self-responsibility or ability to express yourself. There was no individuation whatsoever. Yeah, so almost kind of like a baby stage. Yeah, where you take what is, and that is what it is. And you don't actually feel yourself as yourself. Yeah, so I can say this is a spiritual debate that I'm having with you here, Julianne. We call it remembrance because we kind of suffer from a forgetting. Okay, but really at that stage, of leaving the Garden of Eden, it was more like the impulse to individuate, to form your own self-awareness. So is it a good or is it a bad thing? Would you want to go back to Garden Eden, where you
No,
had no I?
the self-awareness gives us freedom to be individuals.
Right, but it also comes with lots of challenges, right?
Yeah,
Because
because it's sort of like an awareness of the body, that we have emotions, that we have a physical body, that we have feelings, emotions. So we have to learn.
we have to take care of it, right? We can
Take
get
care
hurt,
of
we
it.
can get
Know
killed.
thyself. Know how all these things work, our five senses.
Yes.
All of this we have to, like you said, it's like baby steps of understanding how we operate in the physical.
And not just the physical, I mean, also how, nature works, what we can eat, what we can't eat, all kinds of things. There's a
Yeah.
lot of decisions that come with that. So as soon as we step into, seeing ourselves as an individual, there also comes a big task with that, and that is to learn how to discern, right?
Discern and to be self-responsible, like actually that we are responsible for our own health
So,
growth.
so this is an example, very nicely shown here, how we can build a bridge between the practical and the spiritual, even though it doesn't seem to be related yet. So you take something like a symbol, yeah, such as Garden Eden or Yin Yang sign, and you actually start making your own thoughts about it, and you investigate it from all different kinds of perspectives. Yeah, you just let go of all the automatic judgment, yeah, that it was a bad thing to be kicked out of Eden because there we didn't have to worry about anything, and it was you know affluence, and everything was in perfect balance. And here we're recognizing that there are some aspects to that, yeah, that when we think about it ourselves, that we have never really seen. And that is that, yes, if you live in a place where you don't have to think for yourself, you don't have to make any choices for yourself, if you know don't have to, like, you know discern anything, okay, because everything is taken care of, all right, well then, yeah, you do not actually develop an I awareness. Now you just see yourself as a part of the whole, and that's fine. It's almost like animals to a degree, because animals have that as well, and they see themselves not as individuated beings. So if we want to understand how human evolution has developed, we need to basically redefine all of these things that we believe to be so. Okay, so the yin and yang, most of us associate this with masculine and feminine energies, and it kind of feels good when we look at it, and we can all agree. And I like this particular photo here, or image, because it also has the light in between. So there was something about what you said, Julianne, about finding the middle ground, and really finding the light in between. So all that is just really possible if we fully understand ourselves in our tasking here. Yeah, what is the tasking? So we left Garden Eden, yeah, and now, like you said, we had to learn how to um, operate our body. Then we had to learn how to work with our emotions, yeah, so that we don't kill each other, yeah, so that we don't get overrun with emotions, yeah, without considering sort of the consequences that it would have, and learn, that yes, so if we are interacting with other people, I'm not the only one who has emotions. The others have emotions too. And at that stage, and this is about, a few thousand years ago, when humans started to, settle and live together in villages and stuff like this, when they became more um, stationary, and agriculture was starting to become part of the daily life, where they had to learn how to, how nature works, how the seasons work, and so forth. That's also when we had to start learning about our feelings. Yeah, so we had to learn, how to live together. Yeah, and the together part here was already expressed at the time, because as an individual, it's very difficult for a human to survive. Yeah, so we are designed to live together. Yeah, because there's many aspects of our life. Even, you know, if you just look at our development, takes a long time until we're grown-ups. Yeah, 18, 20 years, maybe, you know, a little less as for the physical development, but then for the mental and emotional development, it takes a long time. Yeah, which means in these first 18, 20 years of our life, we do need the protection of first, obviously, the caregivers, the parents, and then sort of the extended family or village, you know, to the point where we can make our own living. So that requires us to learn all these social rules. And obviously, you know, humanity, if you follow the history of human evolution, and you can see exactly those stages. Yeah, first it was just about learning how to survive and, you know, how the body works, and then it was about learning how to live together. And those all resemble these developmental stages that we go through psychologically. And then it became about, and this is something that we can observe, yeah, in our 20s and 30s, you know, the intellect, yeah, the intellectual thinking, yeah, the gathering more knowledge and the curiosity about things, wanting to understand how things work so that we can optimize things. So thinking, yeah, the intellect is something that allows us to structure things, to do things in a systematic way, in a more, let's say, you know, rational way, where we can say, okay, you know, if we use this particular seed, you know, then, you know, we will get a better harvest. Or if we plant our plants, you know, more toward, you know, the sun, or more toward where there's a water source, and then and we, you know, we're more likely to get good crops. That is an intellectual process, yeah, where we observe things, yeah, where we systematically investigate it and come to the conclusion that it's probably best, yeah, to plant plants, or, you know, to keep animals, or to, you know, build a house, yeah, in a certain way. And that is something that we need to remember as part of you know, our really cool ability, because we cannot just learn through our own experiences. We can also learn from one another. Yeah, and the ability, our intellectual ability, our intellectual evolution has allowed us eventually to learn languages, to write things down, to, you know, sing songs, and to show our offspring, you know, how things go. And so, you know, from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, there has continually been an increase of, you know, intellectual understanding of what we're dealing with. So the height of intellectuality, guys, is, you know, basically, when it comes to the philosophical, basically like somewhere 300, 400 BC, you know, with the Greek philosophers. Yeah, the investigation of how consciousness works and dialectic and all that, you know, that has happened like 2000, almost 2,500 years ago. The height of our intellectual sort of impulse, okay, so the peak of this then was, you know, like around the 14th, 15th century, okay, with Copernicus and so forth, where we've had um, that shift from understanding the world and ourselves in this emotional, physical, and also kind of naive spiritual way, yeah, into the nature science way, yeah. So right around, you know, the 1500s is when humanity turned toward nature science. Yeah, even the Vatican sent out scientists, you know, to investigate how the world works, how the universe works, how plants work, and so forth. The only problem with the nature sciences, and this is something that we are now experiencing, 600 years or 500 years later, is that there's limitations. So if we observe the world that we have, in this way that we kind of materialize it, and say that, okay, everything can be broken down into atoms, okay, and then the components of the atoms, and everything is sort of hyper structured, hyper rationalized. All right, then we eventually arrive at a point where we no longer are able to see that life itself is not part of nature science. Okay, so we can observe, what life does to nature, and how it creates all these different species, and how it creates ecosystems and all these different things that we can observe today. But it cannot really show us how it works. It can only explain it, okay? Because the actual understanding that we need to fully grasp subjects such as, what brings things into existence, what drives evolution and so forth, cannot be answered through nature science alone. This has to come from the experience, from the internalization of nature. And this is something that many of you already experience as an impulse. Yeah? So whether you know how trees are built and how the cells and all that works, whether or not you have that kind of knowledge, you can go out and you can experience, with your full being, what nature can do to you, how it can change your mood, how it can change your physical. We can take plant medicines, and I mean, also just herbs and fruits and vegetables and everything that comes from nature, including animal meat, and see how it does something to us, how it adds vitality or how it takes vitality away. Those are all things that we can observe. That is not nature science. That is organic science. This is coming from a chemist, okay, who sees everything. Myself, as being an ex-chemist, used to see everything just based on chemical reactions. And I understand now that that's insufficient to understand nature and the universe, and especially to understand myself, because I am not just like a machine, that randomly colliding atoms, and everything is going, according to some kind of scientific scheme. I'm very unique. I'm a very individual, person in everything, from the form of my body to the way I move, the way I talk, and the way I think and perceive everything. So there's got to be something else there, other than just like my DNA, okay, that determines how I work with all of this, how it affects me. And this is the part, guys, that when it comes to wanting to better understand or better master the conditions that you're in, the circumstances, and basically the energetics of life. All right, when you begin to see, okay, it's not enough to just look at it from a physical perspective. It's not enough to look at it from an emotional perspective. Yeah. It's not enough to look at things from a pure intellectual perspective. It's also not enough to look at things from a pure spiritual perspective. Those of you that who have worked on energetic perception, you can see here why I differentiate between etheric and energetic. But when you have etheric vision, which is basically the ability to see into the spiritual world. And when I say see, I don't mean necessarily just visually. Okay, so there's more senses. There's involved than your seeing nerve here. Then you can also begin to understand the complexity a little better, because you can tune into things such as life force. You can tune into space and time, all right? And you begin to realize how limited, your ego thinking actually is. And all of that put together, now when we then begin to see the world and ourselves and other people and nature and the universe and so forth from this energetic perspective, yeah, where we really look at, like, okay, how does this affect my body? How does this affect my emotions? How does this affect my way of thinking? How does this affect my spiritual connection? How does this affect my etheric? Okay, that's then when we are arriving at a place that we could call higher consciousness. We begin to see everything as an interaction with one another. Yeah, and it's obviously, pretty complex. So we have to learn how to master these different levels of self-awareness, and then later those different levels of reality, really, yeah, to come to something that we could call understanding, yeah, through your own internalized inner experience. So if I look at where we're at today here as a human collective, all right, we are in a time where we have to form, yeah, or develop this consciousness in us, yeah. So we have a physical body, we have a feeling soul, we have a thinking soul, and we have a consciousness. So the consciousness stands above our physical, emotional, mental, and even our spiritual. Yeah? Because spiritual is a word that many of you use just to say everything, or to name everything that is not material. Yeah, this comes from a perspective, from a binary perspective, because without you being aware of it, you are looking at yourself from a material point of view. And so the differentiation of the spiritual, yeah, is coming from, the material as a reference point. Anything that is not material, this is the definition of spiritual nowadays, we call spiritual. And we know that there is much more to it, so we need to learn to differentiate this, yeah? So, spiritual, etheric, energetic, okay, that's a whole different way of looking at all the things that are working through us and that we are expressing, than just say, oh, it's material or non-material. So here you can already see that you have a bias. Now, here in the Sacred Self-Healing community, we used a calibrated map of consciousness from Hawkins based on muscle testing, yeah, and over 50 years of research, to as a map, okay. So we use other roadmaps, okay, such as we learn how to sense and how to feel and how to think independently, but then when it comes to the non-material, yeah, the spiritual stuff, we use many new little navigation tools, one of which is learning our chakra system, yeah, and learning to tune into our internal experience through these spiritual organs that we call energy centers or chakras. And then that also gets expanded then through understanding that the etheric field that we have, yeah, what people often call aura, is not just in the body, yeah. So we also have sort of fields of energy that go with us, that are tied to our physical, And we can then learn about consciousness chakras. Those are the, basically the organs that are no longer inside our body, but they're still tied to our body. And when it comes to understanding our own conditions, okay, psychologically, then we use the calibrated map of consciousness here, the frequency levels on which we operate based on how we feel subjectively. Just for comprehensiveness here, is there anybody here who has not seen the map of consciousness or never is unfamiliar with this? Is everybody familiar with the map of consciousness that we're working with? Okay, so then I'm just going to assume that there's many other workshops where I explained it. You can also listen to Dr. Hawkins himself. He's not alive anymore, but explaining his wonderful books out there from Hawkins, called many books, but one that explains it the best is probably Power versus Force. And then there's many other books that go a little more into detail. And the main sort of reason why I've chosen to work with the calibrated level of consciousness is because it teaches one important thing, namely the discernment of truth. So when we want to understand the universe, ourselves, and our interactions with the universe, or people, jobs, family, and so forth, we need to first learn how to discern truth. Now, this seems like too simple thing, really, right? Because, I mean, discerning truth, how, why is that a big problem? Well, we're in a time right now where truth cannot be taken for granted, right? Just the most recent collective things that we went through, and all the revelations that are coming forward right now in through the media and misinformation, disinformation, and so forth, all the agendas, the biases, all the things that are coming forward. It shows us that, oh, well, there's a lot of things that we used to take for granted, that we used to believe in, that we used to take as truth, and we come to a new understanding about this right now, that it may have not been true after all. Okay, so we are in a time right now where truth is a, well, I want to say, basically instrumental for us to be able to make big choices during the pandemic, and also right now in a time where there's a war going on, and even if it doesn't affect you directly, where there's a lot of changes happening in our societies, where our conditions are changing, money system is changing, everything is changing right now. Even our relationships, our interactions with another are changing to what they used to be. We have to make a lot of decisions. Our today's life is so much more complex than, let's say, the life of our parents or grandparents as far as decision making is concerned. And this is the reason why it's important for us to know how to find truth. And you can say, okay, my truth is maybe different than your truth. Well, this may be the case when it comes to like how you subjectively experience it. But there are some things that do have an absoluteness to it. And the first thing that comes to mind here when it comes to the discernment of truth is, the ability to decide whether something is good for you or not. And then we can go a step farther. And this is seen from, the evolution of consciousness. To discern whether something is light or dark. Now, whether it will, help humanity evolve, or whether it is driving it into its own extinction or devolution. Those are extremely complex decisions that we are being asked to make now. And we are in times, where we also have very strong spiritual impulses along with very strong material impulses. Yeah, we're being told that AI is going to replace all human creativity, and that we're soon going to be able to download our consciousness into some kind of mechanical device, and then we can clone ourselves and upload it again, things like that. So we're being told that this machine, this human machine, just needs to be treated like a machine, and with technological development, we can enhance our being. All right. On one hand, we're being told that. On the other hand, we are being reminded, either through outer impulses that come in or through inner impulses, similar to what Julianne has mentioned earlier, to remember something. Maybe it occurs to us in a time where we feel very powerless, where we feel that we cannot trust anything anymore, that we feel something like a spiritual impulse that we want to follow. And there too, we have to learn to discern. Not everything that uses the word spiritual or divine or whatever. We've talked a lot about the traps of New Age and the traps of spiritual specialness and so forth in the past. Just because it uses the verbiage or the lingo, or propagates some kind of positive or empowering messages, doesn't necessarily mean that it is contributing to your spiritual evolution. So we are in a highly, highly dualistic time right now, where we basically have to deal with extremes all day long, be it, in regards to these societal topics, health or war or finances, or earth climate crisis and so forth, or in our personal relationships. So there has to be something that we can train or work with, all right, that allows us to get to a place where we can at least decide whether something is constructive or destructive. Whether something is what I like to call conducive, that produces better conditions for me, than other subjects or environments, decisions. And that's what we call consciousness. So our consciousness allows us, I don't want to say bypass, but it allows us to supersede or override everything that comes in as a physical impulse, as an emotional impulse, and even as a mental impulse. How? By taking all that into account and adding those spiritual, etheric, and energetic aspects of life to where we create a more holistic perspective on whatever the decision is that we have to make. We went through this here in the last workshop called Climate Crisis, where I showed you, without giving an opinion or anything like this, that some of these narratives or things that are being propagated in the media are simply false. And it's very, very easy to show that without, sounding like a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, because there are so many things that are not being put into consideration, that if you single out a piece of information without, regarding the complexity of it, then you begin to see the wrong picture. You begin to see just a tiny, tiny part of this, the bigger subject that you want to resolve. And this is the same with our life. We often just look at decisions that we have to make from one perspective. Here before we started the workshop, Julian added or inquired about, personal question in regards to decision making for her business, and there it was very obvious there that the the frustration, and I know that many of you can relate to this, the frustration or the confusion that was there, was based on one particular perspective, and that was how to make more money. That is an important perspective, when it comes to the physical, but sometimes it does not match or doesn't harmonize with other aspects in our lives. Anyone who's ever worked a job that paid a lot of money, but sucked your energy dry, or made you feel bad inside, dirty maybe, or whatever, because you don't really agree with the business tactics or the way they treat their employees or their customers or whatever. So you will understand that, when it comes to such decisions, what should I, devote my attention, my life, my hours, and so forth to? We can't just look at the money part. Now we have to look at the overall energy balance, just like how I showed this with climate crisis. Driving a Tesla isn't going to resolve, climate change. It's such a complex topic. And I made a few comments here in the Skype thread that we have about the looming eruption, volcanic eruption in Iceland. At this very moment, because family members are involved in this, and it gives me like first-hand information, so it's quite interesting. 60% of climate change on this planet is caused by volcanic eruption, guys. All right, so one of these, bigger eruptions today could change everything. We've seen this 250 years ago, where the last big eruption on Iceland has triggered the French Revolution. How? Because it changed the climate for almost a decade, all the way to Egypt. All right, and this created new conditions for people, and they had to adjust to these conditions, and that changed the way they were feeling about things, and that changed the way they thought about things and the way they chose things. Okay, it changes everything when the condition change. So here I want to pose, the thesis that if we better understand our conditions, now scientists will call it the terrain, the conditions that we are in, not just the outer conditions, also the inner conditions, that's when we can make better choices, because it allows us to determine if something produces a conducive, a constructive momentum, or whether something produces a destructive momentum. And sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes the job that pays less but fulfills you and brings you a lot of joy and puts you together with other people, with like-minded people, and that motivates you, and that increases your life force and your curiosity for life, and it makes you want to explore more of life. might be the better choice down the road. Yeah, maybe not right away, but with this increased energy that you have available, you are beginning to see new opportunities, not just through meeting other people and stuff like that. That plays into it as well. But you will increase your perception and you will be able to recognize, you know, what these avenues or pathways are that can get you to what we call higher vibratory solutions. So at this point here, this is basically the intro, yeah, for this three-part workshop, yeah, where we enter this conversation of what energetic conditions are, what our energetic environment, yeah, what the sort of totality, yeah, of our energetic being is. Yeah, I would like to end here and just maybe answer a few questions if there are any, and then refer to our next part that isn't scheduled yet, but you will get the info with the recording, yeah, where I want to go specifically into these conditions that you're in. So without, you know, sympathy or antipathy, without judging whether something is good or bad, I want to go through your conditions with you so that you can better understand perhaps what it is that needs to be changed or what it is that you need to choose, you know, or change, if you will, in order to increase your overall energetic balance, and with it, you know, set yourself up for a more successful, if you will, or more fulfilled, or more peaceful, or more loving, or more truthful, you know, or higher degrees of freedom in your life. All right, so I want to give all of you a homework now, because this is what the nature of a workshop is. Yeah, and I want you guys to write down for yourself, pick one area of life where you would like to make a better choice. Okay, yeah, so this could be money, this could be health, this could be relationship, this could be job, this could be you know, your overall connection with other people, and the feeling of contributing, yeah, to things, community. Yeah, pick one of these areas, okay, and already start thinking, you know, about what your current conditions are, whether they are conducive, yeah, for changing things, improving things, yeah, or reaching higher vibratory ways of living in this area, or whether they are, you know, contradictive, or you know, confusing, or you know, schismatic even. Yeah, so the homework is pick one area of your life that you would like to find a better solution, a higher vibratory solution for, yeah, that you want to master, yeah, and then be ready to you know, share a little bit about your current conditions so that we can learn how to go through things, yeah, in not too systematic, but at least so that we can, you know, replicate this and do this for other subjects in our life as well. So we learn, you know, how to approach these kind of practical problems, including the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, the spiritual, etheric, and energetic perspective. Yeah? Learning how to think, feel, and choose in a more holistic way by applying our consciousness. Any questions at this point? Anything that you would like to clarify maybe, or have a burning question about? Any comments perhaps?
I have one comment. Thank you for going over this and seeing the chart again. This I just noted with the yin and yang symbol, which is very reproduced, almost infinitely at this point in so many different renditions. It can be illustrated and shown. At least I've seen many, many, many ones, and it really was eye-opening to me when I took it from being a static symbol to something that actually is in motion.
Mm.
And as is true for many symbols, we are, especially with well, in the computer age, people are animating things more, but even
Mm-hmm.
so, in a graphic sense, we see a lot of graphics and a little less of handmade things, I guess. But other symbols as well, but that one is very, to me, dynamic. Yet we often are presented with a two-dimensional version of it.
Mm-hmm. So is that what you like? Is that what you mean? Like you like it becomes more life for you? Is that perhaps what you're saying?
I'm just pointing that out. It was a realization to me, so it gives it more dimension, and it's easier to feel into this symbol that carries a lot of weight. And it's like, oh, it's supposed to mean yin and yang, and it's martial arts or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
opens it up to the universal interpretation of it again, like what you were explaining later on here in this discussion. It widens the possibility of what that symbol represents and how it can feel. And I mean, I could go into what I've learned from this symbol and appreciate from it, from going from seeing it as a symbol, going, oh yeah, that's yin and yang, to actually experiencing it. And again, it's kind of like
Yeah.
the theory of it, to going into actually understanding the purpose and perhaps why it's a popular symbol.
Yeah, so Janet, this is exactly what this is all about, like we take, especially symbolism, we take this sort of in an unconscious way, and there's maybe an unconscious consciousness in us that responds to certain symbols in a positive way, and sometimes, we respond in a negative way. But let's just say, even if a lot of people, like the yin and yang, because there's a sort of a simple logic to it in a way. Yeah, we recognize this right away. But there is a whole other level when you begin to actually feel into it, when you begin to, investigate it, use your own curiosity to understand what is all entailed in this symbol. Yeah? That is when you execute, well, that's how you know that you're executing your consciousness. Okay, so your ego will take the preformed judgment or opinion, like how you mentioned it, martial arts, or, Chinese, kung fu, masculine, feminine, all different kinds of things that uh, different people associate with it. But when you actually go into this and feel into, you call it dynamic, yeah, and you realize that there's something else in there that speaks to you on a different level, that is when you are beginning to, sounds a bit mechanical when I say it this way, but execute your consciousness. It is your understanding of it. You forming an understanding of it. You forming insights. You just shared an insight with us. Yeah. So I'm commenting you on, I'm commending you on sharing your insight, because the sharing then is also another dimension of training our consciousness. It is one thing to have a thought, and then a thought along with the feeling, and then to share that and go into feedback with others, all right, which can then add, perhaps often it does, other dimensions to it. Yeah, and this is the part that we need to see here, that we are basically, well, I called it human striving, yeah, that that's the path that we are all on, is to further refine and develop this part in us. Why? Because it is needed. What for? Those are the kind of questions that we constantly have to ask ourselves. Don't take any statement, not my statements either, just as a sort of like a cookie or something. All right, always as what for? What do we need a higher developed, a more refined consciousness for? That is what I would like to discuss with you in part 2, because we need to know for ourselves where we want to go with this. Yeah, so I've laid out, the complexity of life and the complexity of choices that we need to make, yeah, with this sort of individuated, yeah, self-awareness, this individuated I, yeah, that we have come to understand ourselves as. And we are now beginning with the spiritual impulse to recognize that there's more to this I. It's not just the ego I, it is a much greater I. Yeah, so we call this the individuated soul self, or the higher self. Yeah, that is what we are experiencing. And together with you, I would like to investigate this, not just take this for granted, not just say it without having had our own thoughts, our own feelings, and our own, basically choices around that. These are all things that we, just adopted over time, that, yeah, divine self, yeah, divine love, yeah, higher self, yeah. Let's investigate this, guys. Let's become more aware about all these terms and what they mean to us, and how we can use them to make better choices in our life for ourselves. Not better choices based on some kind of outer measuring stick, but the better choice, yeah, the more conducive, the more life embracing, yeah, the more constructive choices that allow us, yeah, to arrive at, or at least work toward, what we just define as our goals, spiritual or not. Yeah, when we want to see ourselves as a spiritual being, which I'm assuming that you guys see yourself as, otherwise you wouldn't be here and spend your time with me, right? Then it's needed to go farther than just thinking with our ego mind, because our ego mind cannot get us there. Our ego mind is not designed, okay, to help us understand concepts such as higher self, or divine self, or individuated soul self. All right, so let's do this together. Yeah, do your homework, pick one area of your life that you would like to make better choices in. Okay, and as an impulse here from me to you, write down or lay this out in front of you what your current conditions are. the current conditions. And then we're going to investigate next time how we can approach making better choices, yeah, how that process works. Thank you so much for coming to this Sacred Self-Healing workshop. And you will receive the announcement for the next 2 workshops with the recording of this part 1, mastering your energetic conditions, environment, and interactions. Thank you, everyone. See you very soon. Bye-bye.